Hello, everybody. I hope we've got all of you joining us here online. My name is Claire Lepan. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Communications at the Calgary Municipal Land Corporation, and we're thrilled to have you all with us virtually today and to be putting on the 10th edition of our Placemakers Speaker Series. We've got a wonderful lineup of speakers, along with some of my colleagues today who are joining us for this conversation. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn more about CMLC's work and that of our partners and consultant teams who are helping deliver Calgary's Culture and Entertainment District. We've got a great lineup of information for you today. For those of you who aren't familiar with CMLC, our mandate is the revitalization of the Rivers District, and we've been working over the past number of years on the revitalization of East Village, and in more recent years have been working on the development in and around East Victoria Park and Stampede Park on the emergence of Calgary's Culture and Entertainment District. We have a number of exciting projects underway, and CMLC doesn't always get the easy projects, and that's why we exist, is to look at how we can help enable these city building projects to move forward, to help create the visions and realize those master plan visions for these areas that really help to transform important communities in Calgary, that help to shape the identity for the city and the identities of these communities as they continue to grow and move forward in the years to come. And that's our focus today, in looking at what goes into shaping some of these communities and the work and the thinking that helps us in our approach and ultimately in what creates these communities into being interesting and vibrant and gathering destinations for years moving forward. I'm joined today by some of the key people who are helping us with that work. CMLC is a small team, a mighty team, but we have a lot of really wonderful, intelligent, smart people helping us solve these complex challenges with projects of this magnitude and scale, and what goes into really crafting these communities to be what we hope what we hope that they ultimately become. Before we get started today, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territories of the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, the Stoney Nakoda, comprised of the Chiniki, Wesley, and Bearspaw First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. The confluence of the Bow and Elbow Rivers acted as a traditional gathering place for these Treaty 7 nations. And as the Culture and Entertainment District is located within this territory, we join in the spirit of gathering and with respect for these First Nations today. So before we get started, hopefully some of you on the line today have joined us in Placemakers series previously, whether in person or on our virtual session that we hosted earlier this spring. And really where the idea of Placemakers came from was to start to highlight the different factors and influences that have gone into delivering the master plan, whether it's East Village or the Rivers District, and looking at some of the different strategies and urban riddles that we've helped to advance in this district over the last number of years, along with all of the various groups and team members who have helped us advance these types of considerations. We've done everything from examining public space development, heritage restoration, programming considerations in terms of how we activate these districts, and retail strategy. And so today we're examining the Culture and Entertainment District and some of the complex and really exciting projects that are underway there. What are some of the factors that shape how people ultimately perceive these communities as they move forward, and how we deliver projects of this nature when we're looking at multi-year, multi-million-dollar projects that are being delivered and underway, many of which are under very similar timelines at this time. So you'll hear a bit more about that today from our speakers, who I'm excited to introduce to you. Before we get started, a couple just housekeeping items. We will allow time at the end of the presentations for panel questions from the audience, and you'll be able to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions, and we will go through as many of those as we can. There'll be 20 minutes at the end of the session to go through these questions. The chat is currently turned off. We'll use the Q&A function to go through those questions from the audience. We also have a closed captioning function in your Zoom bar at the bottom of your screen. You will see a button that you can click for closed captioning to enable those and turn them on at your screen should you choose to use those. So a little bit about the Culture Entertainment District. It's a 286-acre parcel. So if you're familiar with the area right now, from a geography standpoint, it's bound on its east and south side by the Elbow River. It encompasses Stampede Park. On its western border, it's along First Street Southeast, and on the north by 10th Avenue. We've been working on the design planning and urban plan for the culture entertainment since the master plan was completed in 2018. And alongside our partners at Calgary Stampede, we've been working to advance the projects and different planning considerations for this district over the last number of years, along with some of our civic partners at the city and community partners, to help to understand how the projects underway in this area begin to respond to each other, how we plan in such a way that we're really elevating this whole area as it progresses, and how these projects are moving forward over the next number of years will be the focus of our conversation today. So on the screen there, you just get a snapshot, which I'm sure is familiar to everyone, this district, whether you've been at an event at the Saddledome, the 10-day festival, or in the BMO Centre. It's certainly an area with a huge amount of activity and events taking place already. And our goal with these new projects and the master plan is looking at how we really elevate that experience to a year-round community and destination that celebrates all of the special components that this district has already included for a number of years. And before I pass it over to our speakers, what's unique about the Culture and Entertainment District and the projects that are shaping it is, in many ways, the timelines of a number of these major city building projects are progressing quite concurrently. So today you'll hear a bit more about the BMO Centre Expansion and the architectural considerations that go into creating an experience in a facility like the Convention Centre. And you can see on this image here about all of the sort of complementary facilities and experiences that take place within what is a relatively small district within Calgary on its east side here, and how the master plan is helping shape what this district becomes moving forward. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Michael Lockwood. Michael and his team at Populous have been working alongside our team at CMLC and the team at Calgary Stampede in the city of Calgary, and helping us shape and design the expansion for the BMO Centre, a $500 million expansion to the BMO Centre on Stampede Park. Michael is a design director at Populous. He has delivered award-winning work in the heart of America through San Antonio's Convention Centre expansion and renovation very recently, along with one of the busiest public spaces in all of Australia with the ICC Sydney. Each is notable for its integration for complex facility planning into the urban environment, which has been a huge consideration for us, and to improve the customer and destination experience. So with that, I will pass it over to Michael Lockwood from Populous.
Thanks, Claire, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to be here. Thank you for having me. This is a great opportunity to talk about placemaking in general, and I think this is a great forum for that conversation. I'm going to focus on the BMO Centre, the Convention Centre that we are designing and now building in the heart of this district. And I think the map that Claire put up was it reminded me of how difficult this project actually is, and all of the elements that go into creating a convention center, which are typically large facilities with large spaces within them. But district creation and drawing the community in and linking together communities and districts is a very challenging thing when you have such a large building type. So I'm gonna go through a brief presentation here about how we do that, how we view the destinations within which we work. Chris and Kelly will follow up with some information in more detail about that. But I wanted to take a moment, Claire, you mentioned gathering. This site has been a gathering place for generations. And I think it's great that we are talking about that word, because there's been nothing more affected in the pandemic than humans gathering together. So we started this process pre-pandemic, and you'll see some of the steps that we went through to design this facility and this location. And then half of our design process was during the pandemic when we could not gather. So we were designing a public assembly building in a global pandemic, which offered new challenges. But I think it was great. It was so fantastic that we were able to come together before the pandemic to really dig in deep and dig into the programming and the opportunities on the site. So with that, I'm going to move into some of the visuals here. This is a view of the project, and I'll get into some more renderings. But to design 500,000 square feet in a location that really is intended to link together all of the complicated projects that CMLC and others are working on. That was the design challenge. Massive rooms, massive spaces. How do you create space for community? How do you create space for gathering? How do you create space for the site to be activated 365? These are all the questions that we ask before we get into the design process itself. What was unique about the Calgary project is it sits on Stampede Park. Claire mentioned the 10-day festival. They use every ounce of the site. The city, if you've not been to it, the city comes alive in a way that is unimaginable. It's the greatest outdoor show on earth. And what we did as a design team is we went through a programming process, but before we actually designed or drew anything, we wanted to experience the Stampede because we needed to know how the site was utilized during that 10-day. And then also, how can we activate it outside of the 10-day, the rest of the year? So that's critically important to how these districts are activated 365, not only for convention guests, but for the community at large, and for anybody and everybody to gather into this location, which you'll see some of the solutions there. But this is how the process starts. We start asking big, broad questions. What's going to draw people here? What can we do with the site? How can we gather? We start with a convention center program. That's the core element of the project. But it's really digging into these other questions about gathering and activation is really what brings into the program all of those magic moments that cause people to make decisions to come here and want to stay longer and leave enriched through a better experience. So we began going through these steps. We had many iterations. This project took on many shapes and sizes, and that's just the exercise that we go through, which is incredibly fun. When you start to ask the big, broad question about urban planning and district connectivity, when you think about the core of downtown Calgary, the East Village, Rivers District, Stampede Park itself, 17th Avenue, every urban condition that exists in Calgary comes together on our project site. That required us to do a lot of different things with the shapes and sizes of the rooms, how we actually assembled the program to allow for the city to come together and flow through this site. So a lot of workshops. Again, it was so great to be in person, digging into these community workshop, landscape, public realm. How can people gather here? How can the convention center support community gatherings? In which ways can we program the site to be a complementary to a convention function? And what we're seeing in the industry is that when you create these great public realm moments, it's good for the convention goers and it's great for the community. And this is really an authentic condition of where people can gather on the site. We take that very seriously. We go through these workshops. It's a lot of difficult work, challenging, but extremely fun and rewarding when you actually come to a solution that satisfies all of these goals that we put forward in the workshops themselves. So we tend to ask big questions, and the bigger questions you ask, I think the answers become more powerful. And we talked about gathering a lot in Calgary for reasons I've already mentioned. We've gone all the way back to, why do humans gather, period? And this is more relevant now than ever. We come together to exchange ideas. We come together to exchange stories, to make memories together. And we've gone all the way back to gathering in a cave around a campfire. And that was important because the Stampede and Calgary in general, we talked a lot about the spirit of the West. How do you design a facility that really embraces the spirit of the West? We talked a lot about the frontier and the willingness for people to just go and explore and take risks. And that really fed into our design process. And again, tapping into this idea of gathering around our fire. And now inside of our building, we have this massive fireplace that is exactly for that purpose, gathering, people coming together, having conversations, having those serendipitous connections, as we'd call them, where you go to a convention and you may go to a meeting room or a ballroom or an exhibit hall, but it's really about that magic moment when you've bumped into somebody that you intended to or didn't intend to, and you exchange information together and you go forward from there. So this entire project really came down to this massive fireplace in the main space, which I'll get into in more detail here in a minute. So drawing inspiration, there is so much inspiration in Calgary. Not only the geographical location, but all the events, the Stampede, of course, the materiality. There's amazing architecture being designed and built in the city. It's really exciting to be there. So there's so much inspiration to draw from. I would say being at the 10-day festival, the one thing that kept occurring to me was that there's so much awe and wonder. There's so much going on. And so we wanted to design a building that captured that. So even when the 10-day wasn't going on, the building actually reminded you of what the festival was all about. So obviously the fairgrounds, some of the rides, some of the excitement, we wanted a building that captured that excitement and basically froze it in place so that if you were there, you know, in a different time of the year, you had some sense of the excitement that would occur during 10-day and possibly draw you back to that point in time. So diagrammatically, at a very, very high level, this building, we took a lot of the big spaces and we created and carved out space for the public realm. We could have easily built to the property boundaries. We could have built to the site edges, but that's not really where people want to gather. We can gather in a building, but we wanted to prioritize the outdoor space and create some moments for the Stampede to occupy the site so that during the 10-day, we could have lots of community programming on this site. But then more importantly, outside of the 10-day, how might a convention use this property for a concert, for a food truck festival, for community gathering areas? So we felt very strongly about carving out the facility, carving out the building, the diagram to actually leave space for the community to gather here and take care of the convention programming within the site itself in a different way. So this is the diagram of the facility that is being built. You'll see the entry locations, and I'm not sure if you're able to see my mouse, but I'm going to draw on the screen a little bit. This is 17th Avenue that bends around to the west and then the southern edge of the site and links up and drives north to Stampede Trail. So one of the big components of this project is the Saddle Dome currently sits to the right-hand side of this image, and then there's a new event center being built just to the north of that. We wanted the convention center to allow people to move through it and around it in a way that was conducive to public circulation. There's a new light rail station being built just to the west of our project. We didn't want the convention center to be this huge blockade in how people move through the community. We literally wanted to lift it up and let people walk through it. And that was the creation of this large plaza space and a gateway feature here to the right, which people can move through. So by doing that, we stacked the ballroom up on the 3rd floor over meeting rooms on the 2nd floor and then exhibit hall on the 1st floor. So by vertically stacking all of that space, we were actually able to dedicate more open space that the community could come and use and gather in, which was really, really important for this solution. So here's a rendering of the project looking toward the west, toward the downtown. This project is literally the link between what urban Calgary is today and Stampede Park to the left. We wanted it to be that iconic facility that could be both. It could live in the urban environment, but it also needed to embrace the open space and allow Stampede to take place during the 10-day. And you can see it's much more crowded than this in reality, which is great. But it gives you a sense of the excitement that happens on the site and how our building, by literally backing out of the way and allowing great things to happen in front of it, it really becomes ingrained into the community culture in a big way. There are lots of little moments. You can see this grand staircase under this canopy. You know, when I was there for the 10-day, I think one of the most special things I experienced was the show band coming out on the steps of the Saddle Dome and performing to the crowd. So we grabbed those moments and actually integrated them into our programming exercise, looking for things on the site that were going to go away during this design and construction process, and then how could we build those back into our facility and back into the community culture was a huge aspect of the design and planning process for our team. We had to satisfy all of the programming aspects for the convention center, of course, but it was really looking for those magical moments that are about the community, about the spirit of Stampede, and how we could provide those in and around our facility for those elements to live on forever and ever. Here's an image of the ballroom. So this 50,000 square foot ballroom with Prefunction is elevated looking toward the west. And for us, you know, the simplicity of the structure, but generating this iconic element in the city skyline was important for us. Again, scaling down the urban CBD area down into the Stampede Park. Very simple materials, taking off cues from the masonry and some of the other facilities on the site as a base. And then this copper clad ballroom and canopy structure, which has a lot of resembling, you know, old barnwood and sort of the peeling back of a silhouette of something standing in an open barn door. So it was a great series of references, but really we needed this building to be beautiful on its own when there's not Stampede going on, or possibly not a convention. We wanted to contribute positively to the architecture of Calgary at large. One of the big concepts we had was own the winter, as the design team challenged us, CMLC and the stakeholders challenged us, we need to own the winter. And so you would think the opposite of allowing a lot of open space on the site. How does that exist in the winter? But what it did is it allowed us to program it in unique ways. A community skating rink, a large Christmas tree, providing places for the community to gather at the doorstep of the convention center was a huge aha moment. So I think these renderings do a great job of showing the activation possibilities of the site. And so owning the winter isn't just being inside and being active, it's actually being outside and allowing folks to engage in the outdoor activities. Calgary, the weather can change by the hour. So if you're in a convention and the sun comes out, giving people the ability to step outside and engage with the community, the local fabric is really important for us. So we prioritize that in this own the winter concept, and it's resembled here in this image. So moving inside, this is the exchange. This is where all things come together. We designed this building around the future of social connections within conventions and meetings and gatherings. We have meeting rooms, we have ballrooms, we have exhibit halls. Those are areas for business, of course, meetings, getting content, getting information. But really, when we go to conventions, we're there to meet people. We're there to come together. We're there to advance our business, advance our networking. So we wanted to prioritize that. So we designed the entire facility around this concept of coming together. And we did call it orchestrated serendipity. So by centralizing this space and centralizing all of the circulation to always feed you back to this place, you are guaranteed to rub shoulders with who you wanted to rub shoulders with when you go to a convention. There's a lot of programming that goes into this site, and I'll go to the next slide here where I'm labeling some of these. So from the left to the right, we have a grandstand where people can gather. People could play music. During the Stampede, there is so much live music going on. We wanted that to live on in the site longer than just the 10 days. So allowing for that to happen in the project is very important. We do have a connection to the older part of the convention center, which takes you down some escalators and across into the existing facility to connect to those meeting rooms and exhibition halls. You'll see the large fireplace in the middle of the room as that central figure, that central feature that is leading up to this massive skylight to allow natural light into the space. Grand stair, of course, which takes you up to the ballrooms, the ballroom areas. We have a little bird's nest for a VIP experience that you could rent for a smaller group, and then the Lasso Bar. So, it's fairly simple. When people come together, give them some coffee or some beer, and they'll hang out for a little bit longer. And so we wanted to bring that into the space and really capitalize and advance the future of what conventions are all about and why you would come to these events in the first place. So here's another view of the exchange. You can see lots of different seating types, lots of different places for people to gather. This is where you might grab your laptop and a coffee and hang out for a bit, talk to some folks, duck into a meeting, duck back out, go to the exhibit hall, come back. This is a space that we wanted people to come back to again and again. And this is really what we think is the future of convention experiences, which are these socialized spaces where you're coming together to gather around a fire and have a great conversation. So yet another view, sitting on the grandstand, now you can see the skylight. So you get this idea of always having access to the outdoors, great views of the plaza, and then lots of natural light pouring down into the fireplace feature. And whether you're up on the balconies with the ballrooms looking down into the space during a pre-function event, or down in this area, you're always around people. You can always see where people are, and you can always see where the meetings are happening and coming and going, but it's always bringing you back to this location. So a closer view of the fireplace. We're trying to set a Guinness Book of World Records, the largest fireplace in all of Alberta. I'm not sure if that's a thing, but we'll make it a thing. But it's super fun, super elegant. Again, just coming together, sitting with your colleagues or meeting new people. It's really about connectivity and designing the spaces that allow for that. Again, these are not traditional convention center programming elements, but this is something that our entire team came together with the client included. Like how are we going to create spaces for people to come together? It was really important that we integrate those into the project. Here's the Lasso Bar. So again, you can see how this space can transform, bringing that sense of elegance, bringing that spirit of Stampede, the spirit of the West, into a design feature like this called the Lasso Bar. So coffee in the morning, cocktails in the afternoon, pretty straightforward. But integrating these features into a convention center is unique. This looks more like a hotel lobby or a space that is more conducive to gathering for more hours during the day. This is where you might come and recharge and hang out for a bit and then continue on with your day with meetings and events and things like that. Here's the pre-function area that is, once you leave the exchange, this is the pre-function leading you to the grand ballroom. Lots of views to the west. You're looking out over the plaza and looking south at Stampede Park. And then when you move into the ballroom, we wanted to create this experience for the speaker. So a 50,000 square foot ballroom. If you're looking out these windows, you're looking directly at the Canadian Rockies. So really driving home that sense of place. I am in Calgary. I am in a place that is beautiful, with windows that open up to the outside, and you can see the CBD and the Calgary Rockies beyond. So it's a really special experience, not just for the convention goers, but also for the folks that are presenting and speaking in the space. So with that, I will pass it on to Chris to talk about his content. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Just as we're getting through Chris set up here, I'll just do a little introduction to Chris. I've had the good fortune, along with my colleagues at CMLC, to work with Chris and his team at Resonance for the last number of years in helping us think through and shape the different place brands that have progressed in East Village and more recently in the CNE, that help to capture what become very technical urban plans into a more digestible and exciting narrative as to what the vision for these communities and districts is and what goes into creating them. Chris and his team are also behind the exclusive ranking of the world's top destinations, which you can find on bestcities.org, which look at a number of different factors and metrics that help develop the metrics for what influences how people perceive and experience different cities. Chris himself is a futurist, a marketing strategist, and a facilitator with a master's degree in studies of the future, and has married his marketing expertise with future methodologies to a variety of clients to help envision and create development strategies, plans, and place brands that shape the places and around the world. As president of Resonance, Chris leads a team that has completed more than 100 visioning, strategy, planning, and branding projects for cities and destinations and developers in more than 20 countries. And it's with my great pleasure to pass it over to Chris to learn more about their work and how that influences cities like ours. Chris?
All right. Great to see you all today. Thanks, Claire, for inviting me to speak with you today. Enjoyed Michael's presentation. Great to see all the beautiful imagery. Unfortunately, I'm only going to be sharing data with you today, so we'll won't be quite as visually stimulating as Michael's presentation, but we'll hopefully have a few key takeaways for you that come out of that process. So really going to talk to you today a little bit around what it is that attracts people to places, and why is this project in the culture and entertainment district not just important to quality of life in Calgary, but really to its economic future. And I think oftentimes we look and we think about these things as it relates to entertainment and culture as nice to haves. But as Claire mentioned, the research that we've been doing around understanding cities and the rankings that we do for the Best Cities reports has helped us to understand that a lot of what makes a city valuable and important for businesses has a lot to do with the factors that attract visitors as well. So our Best Cities rankings, quite briefly, you can learn more about it at bestcities.org if you're interested. But this is a process that we really started over 7 years ago, trying to understand what is it that attracts people? Why do they choose a city to live in? Why do they choose a city to visit? Or why do they choose a city to do business? And then being able to collect a variety of data and metrics, which we've now compiled for over 400 cities around the world. And over the last 7 years, we've been digging into that to then try and understand, well, what is the relationship between some of these factors and how do they shape our perception of cities versus actually shaping the performance? And that's really what I want to dive into and talk to you today. So to start with today, we'll look a little bit first at just what do people tell us is important in choosing a city to live, visit, or do business. And that is, pretty common. If we thought about, and I did a survey with you all today, it'd be relatively easy to think about what those factors are. So the first one I'll talk to you about is our survey with Ipsos here. And we did this survey to look at and understand what it is that people can choose for these three different perspectives. And for some reason, I'm not able to advance the slides here. So, okay, here we go. So the most important factors in choosing a city to live are here. And this is kind of pretty commonplace. And this was based on the survey we did with Ipsos, looking at a cross-section in the United States of households. And I think if we all asked ourselves, what are we looking for in a city, they would probably line up pretty close to this in terms of we want to live somewhere safe, we want to live somewhere affordable, we want job opportunities, we want a good healthcare, we want to live in a place that has good climate, we want to have a good quality of environment, and we want good schools for our kids. So this is pretty common. When you think about also thinking about what do you say is important in choosing a city to visit, of course, safety comes up again. Cost, we want affordability, we want to go to places that have good climate. For US households, they want to go to places where English is spoken. Think about flight access, how do you get there? If you're going on vacation, you oftentimes want to be near a beach or water. These are all things that are probably at the top of your list as well as you kind of think about choosing a place to visit. As you think about then going in and choosing a place to do business, this is what business decision makers told us was important. And again, you see crime and safety at the top of the list, housing affordability, they're concerned about workforce. They're also thinking about what's the commute time for their workers. Of course, taxes come up, and they're also thinking about infrastructure, availability of housing. Interesting though, they also say an exciting city environment is important to them. And the reason we have 12 on this list is actually because there's a real plurality of importance. There's only a couple percentages points difference between number 1 and number 12 on this list. So the reality is when you talk to businesses and what they say is important in choosing where to invest, that exciting city environment is just as important as taxes to them. There's really not a large difference between all of these different factors. So there's a much wider set of factors that they find is important to them. So as we think about then, how do you kind of look at this all together? Is in one way to kind of overlay these on top of each other is to be able to think about, well, there's actually 3 different perspectives here that we're looking at in terms of what's important to choose in a city to do business, to visit, or to live. So you look at these 3 different perspectives here, and we see sort of this doing business, all those factors at the top, the place to live in the bottom right, thinking about vacation over the left, and you start to see some of these overlap. And as you saw, there were 3 in the middle there around this, what we kind of think about as the 3 C's of places of, crime and safety, cost, and climate. And then there's others that overlap, like exciting city environment, important for people choosing a city to do vacation or business. And there's others that overlap between business and place to live. So what's really important just to take away from this is that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and that we're looking at this from different perspectives. And some of them overlap, and some of them don't. So when we talk about what's the best city, it really depends on your point of view. Are you looking at it as a place to do business, as a place to vacation, or a place to live? But these are all just based on what people tell us is important. Now, what I really wanted to spend some time with is to dive into, well, what's actually influencing the economic performance of cities with respect to attracting companies, with respect to attracting investment and creating jobs in cities today. And do they line up with the factors of what businesses tell us is important? And I think we're going to see that some of these things do, and some of them do not, which is what's really interesting as you get into the data. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll be able to talk a little bit around these correlations with economic development. And I'll share with you a few as we move through here on the next one, what we look at from a perspective on different pieces of economic development. So whether that's employment, whether that's large firms, or whether that is looking at foreign investment and creation of jobs. So if you could advance to the next slide, please. Let's talk just about gross domestic product in terms of you think about the GDP of an economy. Next slide. The GDP is kind of the most common factor that people would think about as it relates to the size of an economy. And it's not surprising as you look at these correlations. What we're really looking at is, one would be a perfect linear correlation where these 2 things match up. So in anything really over 0.5 would be considered a moderate correlation. So everything you see on this screen here has a very high correlation with the gross domestic product, the size of the economy. So that's not to say that these things are causing the growth of the economy, but they have a relationship and they go together. So not surprising to see things like Fortune 500 companies or restaurants or museums, that the larger cities, the larger the economy, the more restaurants there are, the more professional sports teams there are, the more Facebook check-ins there are, the more nightlife there is, etc. If you can go to the next slide. I think what's interesting here is to look at those things that are at the bottom of the list. And again, so we saw that actually, while people tell us that safety, climate, healthcare, taxes, housing affordability, commute times are really important in choosing a place to do business, well, in fact, that actually, the larger the economy, the less there is a relationship with these things. So in fact, the larger the urban economy is, then that has nothing to do with weather. There's no correlation with weather. There's no correlation with crime. There's no correlation with the quality of the schools. And in fact, in some of these things, there's a negative. You can see these things in red at the bottom, that the larger the urban economy gets, actually taxes go up. Housing becomes less affordable. Commute times become longer. And if you think about it, this is quite logical. In fact, that you would look at it and think about, yes, the bigger the city is, the longer the commutes are, the less affordable the housing is, taxes are higher. So while people tell us these are important, they say it's important in choosing a place to do business, it's not exactly lining up with what we're seeing in terms of the actual performance of cities. But let's go to the next section and talk about large companies. So these are companies with more than 1,000 employees. So what's important to them is, or what we see the relationship is connectivity. So this didn't come up so much in our survey with business decision makers, but actually one of the most important things in determining where large firms are locating is the airport, in terms of the number of flights, that number of cities that have direct connections to your particular city. But then interesting, look at what's right behind that is things like, restaurants, number of professional sports teams. And we also are seeing Google Trend results in terms of how much are people searching for your city. And then things like museums, sites and landmarks. So again, this isn't saying that these things are necessarily causing large firms to locate in the city, but they seem to go hand in hand together, that if we want to attract large companies, we need to be thinking about nightlife, attraction, museums, sites and landmarks. A lot of these things that we might think about as being more focused towards tourism and visitors are actually showing a strong relationship with attracting large companies. Let's go to the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit around some of, again, you see these things that focusing on what's at the bottom of the list. Again, business decision makers telling us that taxes are important. Well, actually, there's no relationship at all. It's not positive or negative. It actually comes out at zero in terms of the relationship between taxes, corporate tax rates, and where companies are located. And I think this is sort of one of the largest fallacies. We put a lot of emphasis on what are taxes, and it is a factor for some newly formed companies and startups. But as it relates to where large corporations are locating, again, you can see taxes, crime, housing affordability, commute times, these are all showing slightly negative relationships. And that's not to say these things aren't important and that we shouldn't be striving to have safe cities and we shouldn't be striving for affordable housing and to reduce commute times. But really, those are more for quality of life and are not actually driving economic growth. So the next slide, and talk a little bit around foreign direct investment. And we've looked at the number of jobs created by foreign-owned enterprises as a proxy for the amount of cumulative foreign investment that's gone into a city. And here you can see Fortune 500 companies back at the top of the list. So foreign investors like to locate where large companies are, probably because they're suppliers, partners. And you starting to see some themes here, right? Where other things like professional sports teams, restaurants, museums, culture, sites and landmarks are all having this very high relationship with where foreign direct investment is going. Here you also see the ranking of the local university. So the university starts to become important in determining for foreign companies where they're looking at the reputation of the university seems to be one of the things that have a strong relationship with where they're choosing to invest. On the next slide, we can again start to see some of the things that are again at the bottom of the list here: corporate tax rates, housing affordability, commute time, weather, the quality of the environment. So these things again are not showing a strong relationship. So you're starting to see it probably starting to sound like a broken record here of some of the themes here around the relationships. And here actually you can see Convention Center has a moderate correlation with where foreign direct investment is going. And that's, I think, important because we think about convention centers as actually a showcase for the city, that likely you're not going to invest in or build a business in a city that you've never been to. And business events are one of the ways that people from foreign countries first experience and discover a city. The next slide we'll kind of look at it as we think about, lastly, just sort of new businesses, as you think about the formation of companies. And this is interesting because, you start to see a little bit of difference here from what we saw previously. When you think about large corporations, GDP, I mean, these are, big corporations, big measures. But now we start to think about, well, startups, where are they going? And you actually get quite a different list here. And interesting that the number one thing we found that has a correlation with the formation of new businesses is the number of recommended nightlife experiences in TripAdvisor. So again, some of these things might seem a bit esoteric. Where did these come from? We've analyzed over 1,000 different data points in this correlation analysis, from statistics to mining data from TripAdvisor, Yelp, Facebook, Google, Instagram, et cetera, to be able to try and look at and understand what is really driving these relationships. So nightlife, the vibrancy of the city, seems to have the strongest relationship with where new businesses are being formed in cities in the US. And of course, you see things in venture deals, so venture capital, but then also immigration. So how important the growth of immigration is to where new startups are being formed, along with the ranking of the university. So the university actually becomes one of the key institutions and the anchors for fostering the growth of startups and new businesses. And then here, actually, you do see that safety, while we didn't see that as being having a relationship with where large businesses are, it does seem to have a moderate relationship with where new businesses are being formed. And then, of course, you see cultural experiences in here, number of recommended attractions, et cetera. We can go to the next slide. We can kind of move on down that list. And here we don't find any negative correlations. Weather seems to be more important, quality of the environment, quality of healthcare, housing affordability, commute time. So some of those things that seem to have a negative relationship with where large businesses are located, we do see that they have a positive relationship with helping attract startups and the formation of new businesses. And here you can see things like tax rates do matter. So we're not saying that some of these things don't matter at all, but you can start to see, well, what's the relative level of importance? And I think a lot of these things that we think about in economic development around housing affordability, we're thinking about climate, we think about tax rates, and we kind of think that those are at the top of the list because that's what people tell us is most important. Well, in fact, that's not really the case. They do have a relationship. There is some importance there, but it's actually the vibrancy of the city that's really driving and attracting large businesses, foreign direct investment, and where startups are choosing to locate. That's good. The next slide. And I think it's important, as I said, just that correlation does not equal causation. So we can't say that these things are necessarily causing foreign direct investment or causing startups, but they seem having a relationship that they do seem to go together. The next slide, I'll talk a little bit about this idea that livability doesn't equal prosperity. And it was interesting when we first started this research, that was our thesis going back over 10 years ago, in my work, and of how livable cities would be attracting talent, attracting companies. And it's not to say that livability isn't important. As I mentioned, quality of life is something we should be striving for in terms of having great schools, having safe cities, affordable housing, reducing commute times. These should be all goals that we strive for, but we shouldn't expect that those things will lead to prosperity and economic growth. I think what we can say is that some of those logical factors do have a relationship with prosperity. So you saw a convention center, the airport, the university. There are things that business decision makers told us was important that we have proved and demonstrated do have a relationship with economic growth and economic development, but they're not the be all and end all. In the next slide, we think about this idea really that it's the vibrancy, the things that were at the top of that list that are driving prosperity. And I've summarized those here on the last slide, where we think about what is it that attracts startups, that attracts foreign direct investment. So yes, we need to have a great airport. Yes, we need to have a great university. But it's all of these other things that I characterize as the software of the city, whether that's our sports teams, it's our restaurants, museums, culture, sites and landmarks, how sticky your city is in terms of Instagram and hashtags, the nightlife that we saw that was the most important thing in terms of where new businesses are being formed relates to that. So I think the main takeaway for this and why I think the culture and entertainment district is so important to Calgary's future is not just to be a city for a gathering place for Calgarians, which, having grown up in Calgary, I'm excited to see this come together, and it will be a great place for Calgarians to gather together. And it will be a great economic catalyst in terms of supporting Calgary's tourism industry and attracting visitors. But what the Culture and Entertainment District really could be is an economic catalyst for the city that will help shape and define its future by featuring so many of these different elements and helping elevate Calgary's and the perception of Calgary as a vibrant destination to gather, to have experiences. And these things, while they haven't been part of our life very much in the last couple of years, I think, we are going to see a boomerang effect here where however much we end up remote working, the need to gather together is going to be stronger than ever before. And the Culture and Entertainment District is going to be the ideal place to do that. So with that, thank you very much for your time. I know we hit you with a lot of data in a short period of time. If you'd like to learn more about the rankings and some of the methodology, you can visit bestcities.org or send me an email and be happy to connect. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. That was amazing to see all of the different considerations and research that goes into the Best Cities ranking and how that affects these destinations that we're all familiar with and love to visit. I'm going to shift gears here just in the interest of time over to my colleague, Kelly Coles, who is the Vice President of Design and Construction at CMLC. Kelly is leading the delivery of the Master Plan for East Village and the River District Master Plan, which is the Genesis urban plan for Calgary's Culture and Entertainment District. Through her oversight, she's leading the development management on key city building infrastructure projects, including the BMO Centre Expansion, which you heard about earlier, and the 17th Ave extension and Stampede Station rebuild, along with the Arts Commons transformation. So Kelly's going to give some insight into CMLC's role in looking at how the coordination of these projects comes to be when we're looking at complex multi-million-dollar projects that are underway across the street from each other, how that is delivered from a project perspective and what that affords to the C&E moving forward. Over to you, Kelly.
Thank you, Claire. My presentation sits somewhere between Michael's and Chris's, and in that it's not as pretty as Michael's, but there's not so much data, somewhere in between. I really just wanted to spend today talking about the execution of the work as it relates to the master plan and the building of a vibrant district and the successful Culture and Entertainment District specifically. We heard Chris speak about all the things that make a city desirable to live, play, and work in. And we heard about the components and the building blocks required to make Calgary a world-class city. And, as Chris mentioned, it's the nightlife and the gathering and those things really that define a Culture and Entertainment District that becomes one of those significant key components. We also heard Michael speak about the configuration of spaces as it relates to BMO, and the creation and the design of those spaces supports the creation of great places, really. So places that people want to spend time in, whether that's indoors or out, 365 days a year. And it's those things that form the Culture and Entertainment District, or will form the Culture and Entertainment District. But when we think about the practical nature of the work that is required, so the execution, the delivery of the work related to the individual components that align with the master plans. So the project delivery process. So again, this is how we deliver the projects and the execution of the projects. And really, this is the intersection of where the innovative thinking and approaches occurs with thoughtful planning and the tried and tested processes. And it's these tried and tested processes that I wanted to speak about. So when we look at Calgary's Culture and Entertainment District, it really is in its infancy, and we have to begin to understand all the work that's to be undertaken to realize the full vision of the master plan. So as Claire mentioned, logistically, we're looking at a relatively small area, but with an incredibly concentrated focus of work. You heard Michael mention how complex and complicated the BMO project was, and the projects that you see on the screen here are all of those things. So when you put them all together, it's really, really important that we have this tested process that creates this framework for the delivery of each of these projects. So this slide on the screen reflects the interface between some of these key district initiatives, as well as the varied group of stakeholders that have a hand or an investment in the planning and the design and the construction of this district. And you can start to see how each building or infrastructure project interfaces with one another and the dependencies that really start to play out here. So this slide indicates there's 11 large-scale projects indicated on this one. However, there's many more projects that are occurring that are starting to knit together those larger city building projects. And all of this to happen over the next handful of years. Actually 3 years really, but some of them go up to 2024, the ones you see here. So an incredibly amount of work, complicated work, complex projects to occur in a short period of time, which makes this framework and this process that I'm going to speak about in detail even more important. Each of these projects and the district's success is dependent on other projects. So, one failure in this scheme really puts the whole district in jeopardy. So critically important that we have some rigorous processes in place. Next slide, please. So with all the work that needs to be carried out to realize the full vision, the full vision to take shape, we also have to consider what the interim condition looks like. So the master plan is a 20-year long-term vision, but what does short-term look like? What does medium-term look like? What do these temporary conditions start to look like? And that's where our process starts to help us out a little bit as well. We still have to have businesses operating in the district and residential considerations as well, and think about all these things as this full vision is starting to take shape. So how do we do this? We really just follow this process, and you can see the 6 phases here on the screen. And this process is scalable and it's adjustable and flexible for specific projects and specific partner requirements as well. Excuse me. So the process can be broken down into 6 general phases, and the extent to which they're applied really is dependent on the project and dependent on a number of project factors and partner factors as well. Next slide, please. So strategic planning and procurement phase, so critically important in all these projects. And it's at this stage that we carefully consider the project viability, alignment to broader goals, that's partner organization business goals, and alignment with the master plan, of course. Will the project result in strengthening connections? I keep hearing the word connections. I heard Chris speak about connections, and I heard Michael speak about connections, and that's one of the things that's always front of mind for us as well as we do this work. Will each of these projects be fundamental components of a master plan? Will they support a vibrant district? Will they create quality experiences, and will they create a greater vision for Calgary? And these are all the questions that are asked at this stage in the game. Next slide, please. It's also through this stage as well that we often kick off our public engagement strategy, and that's to include the larger community in the conversation. So what does the community value? What does the greater Calgary value? What are its expectations in terms of the district and how we're going to get there? Next slide. Yeah, thanks. Another critical planning step is to ensure success is thinking about the governance of the project. So how is the decision making occurring? Where do the accountabilities lie? How do we think about setting up agreements that give us mechanisms to make key decisions or to pivot when required or course correct in projects? And these are all the critical pieces that are occurring during this phase of the project. Next slide, please. So you'll see on this slide here, this is a image of the Arts Commons building, and it's a collection of venues that we refer to as the resident house, and across, so just north of the building you see here will be a new building called the Roadhouse, and those 2 phases of the project, the Roadhouse and the resident house, come together to form our Arts Commons transformation project. I chose this image on the screen because we've just completed the procurement process. So phase 1 being the strategic planning and procurement process is typically the longest process, or can be the longest process. And if we think about the Arts Commons transformation project specifically, this project has been 10 years in the work. So it's a long stretch of time. The procurement is now wrapped up on this project, and it took us just over 12 months to complete. So it sets sort of the foundation for how the project goes forward. Next slide, please. If we're thinking about the design development phase, really, this is where the rubber hits the road. So this is where we get to dream big. This is where we, do the hard work to ensure that these projects have a maximum impact to the community and that they provide maximum value as well. It's the dream phase, but it's also the nitty-gritty phase. And so, again, this process, this 6-stage process, although not always linear, enables us to put structures in place so that we can translate that big dream into something that's real and something that's aligned with the master plan, that's aligned with Calgary's vision for our city in the future, and a number of other things. So we think at this phase about integrating teams and how we take those teams that we engage through the procurement process and set up the structure of how the project will unfold. I think it's next slide, please. I can't remember how many are here, but so this is the phase of the project when we move through concept design. So it's the really exciting phase, and you saw a lot of images that Michael shared earlier, and that was some of those images that early on in his presentation were the concept phase design. So we go from concept to schematic through design development. So really, really exciting time and a highly collaborative time of the project as well. This is a concept, an early concept rendering of the Fort Calgary New Museum, and this one I included to speak to the design development phase. So on the right hand side there you see the existing barracks of Fort Calgary. On the left you see a concept for the new museum to be integrated with the barracks as well. So this project CMLC is involved with. We have oversight through the design phase, and this project is through design phase now. And what we call shovel ready. So when we get a full line of sight to funding, then we will move forward with this project. Regulatory approvals being sort of the third step in the 6-phase process. CMLC, the work we carry out is really unique in this phase of each of the projects. So proactive approach, city design review process to streamline approval. So what that really means and what these 3 bullet points mean is we have a large hand in moving through this process and how it actually occurs. The approach that CMLC takes to the regulatory approvals process really is about 3 things. It's ensuring that all the work we're doing aligns fully with the master plan and the culture and entertainment district long-term vision. It ensures, we have buildings and public spaces, that are design excellence. We want to ensure we're considering our partners' business needs as well and their goals through the district as we do the work. But most of all, we want to ensure a smooth process through the approvals phase. So a good portion of this work is community engagement and engaging our partners, or not only our community partners, but our building partners as well, and ensuring that there are no surprises and that everyone has had ample opportunity to voice their thoughts and concerns. And that sets us up for a very smooth approvals process to head into the project. And next slide, please. This is an image, you heard Michael speak briefly about it. It's the new Victoria Park Stampede C-train station. And it is directly west of the BMO expansion project, which you just see on the right-hand side there. Sorry, I'm just reading a text as it relates to advancing slides. So this is the design is complete and we're well under construction on this project as well. We've worked very, very closely with Stampede and our partners at Calgary Transit to understand the needs, their needs on this project, as well as work collaboratively through the design phase as well. It interfaces directly with the BMO project and also with the 17th Avenue extension project. And these are really, really key component projects to realize our long-term vision for the culture and entertainment district. It's really about accessibility and it's really about creating these gathering spaces. So the purpose of the 17th Avenue extension project was to move 17th Avenue directly into Park and have this at-level grade crossing so that we could create this wonderful public realm space, this gathering space, this festival trail that then has the ability to connect to the north side of Stampede Park and up through what will ultimately become the culture and entertainment district. And this is a rendering of that festival street that I spoke about. So this is a significant connector project. And this one is probably ground zero of culture and entertainment district. Really, it knits together all the large city building blocks that I was just speaking about. It connects the Northeast Village district with Stampede Park and the district and becomes this very public gathering space. So one of the things we want to consider in a vibrant community is not just these designation venues or events like games or concerts, but really creating a community that's desirable for gathering and quality experiences, not always related to being a ticket holder for one of these events. So just the ability for people to come together and experience 365 days a year activation. I heard Michael say embrace the winter, and that's something that we speak about often on this project, but also on the BMO project. Thinking about how we can activate and program and enable that kind of work to happen in throughout the year, and Calgary doesn't always have the most desirable weather conditions. So how can we create these spaces and these experiences for people to enjoy all year? Next slide, please. Construction delivery. So this is my favorite phase. When the shovel is in the ground and we start to see all of our hard work come to life. Oh, great, there we go. Thank you. So we start to, this is when we really work closely with our partners. So in the case of BMO that Michael was talking about, the BMO expansion project, we work closely with Calgary Stampede and the Flames as well, Calgary Transit. So we work hand in hand with all our partners through the district to really understand the impacts of the construction delivery work that's to occur. Very, very complicated work. It takes an incredible amount of communication. It takes an incredible amount of collaboration as well. And this is really the important aspect of this is making sure that there's an open line of communication always. We also, make an effort through the procurement phase to make sure that we're working with teams, excellent teams, and those that have a track record of working in districts like this on large scale projects as well. So not only our business partners and our district partners as well, but our contractor partners and our consultant partners as well have a hand in ensuring that things go smoothly through construction. As an example of this, CMLC provides reports to both the Flames and Stampede on a weekly basis to talk about those things that might impact their operations, what they can expect to see on site, what they can expect to see through the district, and kind of an outlook of what the next 2 or 3 weeks looks like in terms of construction activity. And next slide, please. Another rendering of our BMO project. Very excited to be overseeing this work on behalf of Stampede. I won't talk too much about it. Michael went into great detail about this project. This is an image of the front of halls B and C, which were part of the existing convention center being demolished. And to the left there, you will see the 17th Avenue project as well. That's where the new train station will sit. So you can really get an understanding from this slide of the close interface and the need for constant communication. We also oversee the district construction activity, and we have designated resources within CMLC to do that. So there's constant conversation occurring between all of these projects. CMLC is the facilitator of the exchange of that information to ensure that everybody's pulling in the same direction. And I spoke a little bit earlier about this, but so important is, what does the interim condition look like? How do we enable our partners, businesses to continue? How do we have continuity through the district? How do we have vehicle traffic, pedestrian traffic safely moving through the district? So the very complicated coordination work has to happen on a number of levels for a number of reasons, obviously to align with the project goals, but make sure the public is safe as well, and make sure that any businesses or residences impacted by this work know exactly what's going on, and to the extent that it will impact their lives and their work and their businesses. This is an image, an owl box image of our 17th Avenue extension site and our 17th Avenue crossing site, as well as a little bit of the BMO project visible in this image as well. Operational readiness, so the 5th stage in our process. Again, a very collaborative phase. The operational readiness phase applies to projects depending on kind of the factors and the relationship with each of our partners. But this is when we talk about these projects coming to life and these buildings coming to life. So we think we support our partners through things like furniture, fixtures, and equipment, through a fixturing process. We talk about operating budgets and what it might look like for our partners to run these buildings once they're complete. So a really important piece of work as well, so that we can ensure a successful building open or a successful operations for all our project partners. So the extent to which we do this work really depends on the organization and what came before this new building that we're speaking about. So I think there's another slide here, an example. The library is a great example. So there was a committee put together to talk about how this building might operate once the doors are open. So really CMLC's work spans a broad range, and it's not just about producing the building, handing over the keys and moving on to the next one, but supporting our project partners through the full stage of the process, including operating the building long-term. Next slide, please. We followed a similar process on the 9th Avenue Parkade, and we worked with our partners at Calgary Parking Authority as well as Platform to determine what the needs would be for this building after opening. And then project completion, of course. I had one of my team members a little while ago say how excited they were that one of their projects was coming to completion because the work would ramp down, to which I laughed, because really this is when the work ramps up, and it certainly ramps up in terms of how we support our partners through this project as well. So after the doors are open, we support through training and coordination of the systems. We are a conduit through the warranty period as well. And then we always want to take lessons learned from each of these projects. So lessons learned from everything from the procurement process and how that went, to how the building transitioned to opening, and how it's functioning and performing long-term, and does it meet all of our expectations. So we do a lot of post-mortem exercises, lessons learned, and we bring those forward into our next projects as well. And another image of the library, new central library project. In the parkade that I just spoke about earlier with Calgary Parking Authority and Platform Innovation Center. This slide, so this different from the first slide that was shown. This really just speaks to the level of activity that's still occurring while all these large city building projects and infrastructure projects, public realm projects are underway. An incredible amount of construction activity occurs, and none of the activity in each of these buildings ever slows down to accommodate construction activity. So they remain operational. You see BMO still 7 days a week has events in it. Stampede Casino as well is open and operational. We have a youth campus, so we have over 400 students moving around the vicinity of that building 5 days a week, and the Saddle Dome, of course, has still full events in there as well. So this is why it's critically important that CMLC facilitates the exchange of the information related to construction activities, so that each of these buildings and then some can continue to operate, that there's business continuity, and that we minimize the impact to all of these businesses, residents as well. So on the left-hand side there, you see those towers. Those residents of those towers still have to access their homes. They don't want to be interrupted. They don't want to be impacted by the construction activity. And so it's a very, it's a coordinated effort, and there's a lot of work that goes into managing the oversight of the construction activities. And this is just kind of graphically demonstrating what I just described. So you see CMLC at the center there. We're in such a unique position and a privileged position to be able to support all the partners in these projects. And this is really where it comes together. We are able to create this structure and this framework to make sure that everybody is communicated with proactively, make sure everybody has all the information they need for their own business continuity efforts. But at the same time, really driving the projects forward. So we have schedules to meet and budgets to meet as well. And so this allows us to do all of those things. And that wraps it up for me, Claire. I don't have control of the slides, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Kelly. And thank you to Chris and Michael as well. We've just spent the last sort of hour and 15 minutes going through all the different considerations and factors from architecture to design to programming in place that are helping us better understand the opportunity of the CNE, how we can deliver it on behalf of our shareholder at the City of Calgary and alongside our partners at Stampede and many others behind the scenes who are helping us advance this work. We have 15 minutes left in our program today, and we wanted to allow time for questions from the audience. I do have one question already in the Q&A, but on your Zoom screen, you can add your question if you have one into that Q&A chat or the Q&A function, and we'll see it here and we'll try to get through as many of them as we can. And I'll start with one that's been sitting there for a little while that's toward Michael, which is certainly a topic of conversation that has been frequent around our office as we consider these projects in large public assembly as we've lived through the pandemic for the last 18 months and what the impacts of that have on these types of projects. So Michael, the question was there any particular aspect of the BMO project that had to be redesigned or reconsidered based on the experiences of the pandemic? So I'll start with you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yes, we went through all of our projects, and I'm just going to speak globally here for a moment. As Populous, we specialize in public assembly, so you can imagine how much attention we paid to this very question and this topic. The world experienced the pandemic in different ways. So if you'll remember back in 2020, we actually started to work with some clients on how to get fans and teams back into venues right away. So we started doing, we actually did dozens and dozens of venue readiness plans, we called them, which looked at reduced capacities, looked at crowd mitigation measures, capacity and flow diagrams. We looked at surfaces, materials, products. We looked at every aspect of how humans gather together around sporting or convention events. That was during the design process for BMO. And a lot of the things that we discovered from a convention center point of view, these buildings are the most flexible venues in the world. So different from a sporting facility where you have dedicated seats and suites and spaces to gather, convention centers by their very nature are intended to be very flexible. So we looked at all of the programming, all of the circulation spaces, and simply reducing capacity allows for social distancing, as we know now. Then we looked at the surfaces and materiality and things that you'll see, which are commonplace now: door handles, touchless faucets, elements of access and egress, automatic doors, lots of things that you can integrate into a project to address those touch points. So BMO was sort of right in that process of selecting materialities, and that's where we addressed some of those concerns. But I would say the programming and planning wasn't affected simply because convention centers are intended to be very flexible spaces. We have addressed some of those concerns in some of our sporting and other types of projects, and dealing with them mid-design or adapting existing facilities to respond to the pandemic. But I think as everybody has seen, there's a lot of full stadiums around the world and full arenas, which is great to see people coming back together. So hopefully we can come out of this pandemic together.
Thanks, Michael. That's great. It's really interesting, and it's been an interesting circumstance for us to navigate too, as on the construction side, because it has allowed us to work within a building for a period of time that didn't have events in it. And now as we welcome events back into the BMO, the coordination of that is a huge consideration for us moving forward. While we're waiting for some other questions to come in, I'll pose one, Chris, to you, as you've taken us through the different factors that affect the rankings of cities and how people experience and perceive them, and how that influences the ranking of these destinations. I'm curious your thoughts on, we're in a bit of a sort of the growing stage or the growing pain ages of the CNE district as we work through a significant amount of construction over the next number of years. I wonder if you have any comments on things to consider that how we help bolster the destination and the growth of the destination while we also work through these construction phases as well, which pose challenges to how people experience the space.
Yeah, obviously we'd all like it if we could just snap our fingers and make all those drawings come to life, but it is, as Kelly outlined, it's a process that's going to take some time. You know, I think there's obviously some great assets that are already in place, and this is really where placemaking comes into play in terms of thinking about what are some of the different creative ways we can activate the city, from activating laneways to other events, festivals, that are using temporarily and thinking about tactical urbanism, and obviously East Village and CMLC has done a great job of that over the years. So I think we just have to look at like how can we extend and do that, and think about how we can activate some of the spaces that aren't under construction around these sites as we sort of move towards the realization of these major pieces of infrastructure. What's going to happen around them is probably the opportunity in the near term for us to think about, not just in the Culture and Entertainment District, but East Village and other areas of Calgary as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I see a couple other questions coming in here, and Kelly, probably this one over to you. This is specific to 17th Ave, but I think certainly a consideration that we contemplate globally on all of our projects. But as it relates to safety, we currently have an interim condition at the 17th Ave and McLeod Trail Station crossing where we've brought pedestrians to at grade, which was a big change in the circulation in that area. But the question was around the type of safety measures that are in place when we have large volumes of people crossing these intersections, and how we manage that area and the design of the area to account for those crowds and safe crossings.
Thanks, Claire. Am I on mute? No, I'm not.
You're good.
So under regular conditions, regular meaning non-event time, we work with Calgary Transit, of course, and not only the end design, but the interim design and conditions as well are reviewed with Calgary Transit and Stampede on a regular basis. So when we think about the safety of that space during regular times, that's just an ongoing process, and the design and the conditions that our contractor creates for us addresses those needs that Calgary Transit and Stampede bring forward to us. During event times, it's a little bit different, and quite often this goes back to our partner and sort of their events. I don't want to say events planning, but events consideration. So in some instances, we might have CPS operating that intersection, much like they would in different areas of Calgary. So when at McMahon Stadium, for example, when there's football games there, that CPS gets involved in some traffic controls as well. And Calgary Stampede gets involved in those conversations as well. Again, it depends on the event that's occurring. So it's a different answer and a different condition depending on what the event is, and depending on time of day, and really the volumes of people that we're expecting in that area at any given time. We also work closely, I was just going to say, with our contractors. So our contractors are, they have to be exceptional partners in the sense that they have to be able to adjust and course correct quickly if we ever identify any sort of safety concerns there.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting environment to work in, as I'm sure all the viewers here would be familiar with in Calgary, is that we have really peak episodic times in the district when you have 10-day on or a Flames game, where we have these really intense, concentrated volumes of activity, and then also how it functions day to day has been part of that consideration. This question is maybe perhaps Michael or Kelly could respond to, but I'll start with Michael. It was a question around accessibility and how that's considered in the design of buildings like the BMO or just these larger size facilities. And Michael, I'm wondering if you can add some context that through your experience with populace of how those accessibility considerations go into your designs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a priority for us from a public assembly point of view. I think Darby Young, if I'm seeing correctly, is in the crowd. Darby is our expert accessibility consultant located in Calgary. She's been fantastic to help us design specifically for this solution. Public assembly across the world is something that we've specialized in for almost 40 years now. So it's always been top of mind. We're always trying to innovate, always trying to make it better. Our goal is to create facilities that are welcoming for everyone, period. And I think, yes, accessibility, but what more can we do? How can we provide a better experience, a more accessible experience, so that everybody feels like they belong, everybody feels like they can access the site, especially more difficult when you think about seating bowls or multi-story convention centers. So it's something that is, we consider from day one, and we integrate Darby into the process and her team to help us think about the process differently, how to think about the solution differently. And so it's not just that we're meeting the minimum requirements, we're actually trying to create a place for everybody to gather. So yes, absolutely. And it's very different based on building type, but these are unique building types that require some special attention. So we really appreciate Darby and her team helping us out on this project.
Thanks, Michael. I missed a question at the beginning of our chat here that I just wanted to go back to, and Kelly, it's coming your way, but it's looking at when we have a large number of team members that are helping with the delivery of these projects, and lots of experts in their own realms. The question is, how do you maintain a clarity of vision within the overall master plan and conveying that vision to the consultant team?
That's a good question, and I bet Michael could probably answer this as well. But and that's where the planning comes in. And when I was speaking earlier about governance structures, and I just use that term generally, but really it's in setting up these teams and understanding lines of communication, understanding what our partners' needs are in terms of whatever project we're working on, or in some instances it's really what the community needs. And so continuing to circle back with each of those groups, whether it's a partner, a business, or our community. So we do extensive engagement exercises as well to understand that we're always moving in the right direction. And we, all the work that CMLC oversees and undertakes and manages really is always through the lens of the master plan. So it has to meet the greater vision, it has to meet the partner vision, it has to meet the short-term, medium-term, and long-term vision as well. So really it's in how the project is set up, who's supporting which efforts, and making sure our consultant teams are set up to do that.
Great. Well, I don't at this time have any other questions coming in, so I'll maybe just take a moment so that we can keep to our own schedule and send everyone back on to the next Zoom meeting of their day. Firstly, I wanted to thank all of our participants who are on screen with us today, Chris, Michael, and Kelly, for your time and expertise and thought in helping us manage these really exciting projects for Calgary, and truly something that as we begin to see more shovels in the ground and more steel going up, it really starts to change the shape of how this district functions and how people experience it moving forward. And we're really excited to see that progress further in 2022. And Chris, with your team in helping us parlay that into language and storytelling that helps connect people into what's happening in the area. And we'll also encourage you to follow along with CMLC, with residents and populace, and all the exciting work they're doing outside of Calgary and within this team here. And with the Culture and Entertainment District, our channels are, they're not up on the screen right now, they're C District YYC on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. So follow along, where we'll post information about what's happening from construction through to what's helping shape these projects moving forward, and new announcements that come forward. And we hope to see you in Placemakers series in 2022, where we'll have an exciting lineup of other aspects and themes and considerations of the work behind the master plan and what that looks like moving forward. So I thank everyone for their time again, and for joining us virtually. And we hope to do this in person again soon. And we'll keep in touch. Thank you very much.